Welcome, everybody, to the Gamemode Creative Podcast, the podcast for Minecraft builders. I am Meg.
And I am Rainboom. And my goodness, it feels like eons since we've last done an episode, hasn't it been, Meg?
It has been over a year, I believe. I
Maybe
believe
even
our
more
last
because,
episode was 2022, the end of 2022.
yeah, I was almost about to ask you just about, or actually, when the end of 2021, even in that case, right? Something like
I,
that,
I honestly,
perhaps.
I forget. It's been so long that I've forgotten most of what we've even talked about in past episodes.
Yeah, it's fair. I was gonna say too, I'm glad that you did the intro because I'm sure it would have taken us about 10 different takes if I were doing it, just because I'd forgotten how we did this thing almost for like what, a year plus of not
Oh,
having
but
done
I,
this
I would like to
podcast.
point out, though, on that note, we are trying to change up the podcast a little bit, refresh it just a bit. It's still mostly the same thing, but we are trying to introduce some new segments and also a new logo, just very slight upgrade to the existing logo. Um,
Yeah,
but aside
like
from
a
that,
spot the
it's
difference.
pretty much the same podcast as before.
At least we hope it will be, so that at least you get to enjoy that content. And hopefully, I mean, it seems like the feedback has been quite nice overall, where we've heard that you've enjoyed our conversations. So we're looking forward to being able to share more with you. And glad to be back here. I mean, Meg, the past, what, year and plus has been quite busy for you, I imagine.
Oh,
What have
yes.
you been up to?
Oh, just honestly the same old usual things, but it's just the podcast has just not been a priority, or I had to cut out, some things because other things are taking priority. But now I'm finally reached a point where the podcast can once again be done, which I'm really looking forward to because I have a lot of interesting topics I'm looking forward to talking about in the future.
As do I, and I look forward to being, but yeah, as we get to them, to be able to see what we think about them for sure. I mean, like for me, it's been the same story too. It's funny though what work does to you because I didn't think that when I started my job, not long after we recorded the last episode of the podcast, that I would get so busy. And it's crazy what work does to your schedule. So here I am now trying to juggle my schedule, but I'm glad that I've been able to squeeze some time out and it's kind of been starting to settle. So the podcast can definitely be back for both of us, pretty much, and for you too listening. So we're looking forward to getting to see where this goes.
For today's topic, I was thinking about kind of backtracking and talking specifically to those who are just getting into Minecraft building. So maybe giving them some advice on how to get into it and how to get started in it if it's something they're interested in, because oftentimes we are talking to people who are already established builders who are, have been doing it for years. But what about those who are wanting to get into it but don't really know how? Like, what would you recommend that they do?
Yeah, so I mean, there are certainly several questions, I'm sure, when it comes to, or even just different factors to think about in terms of where to start. I mean, even for me, like I'm still an emerging builder in a sense, I would probably say, even though I've been doing my city project for several, I would like to say several years, but it's only been a couple. But even then, there's been so much development. But when I look back to when I started, it's actually been several years of working in different city projects because I never knew where to start or what to start with. And I think it was trial and error. That definitely was one thing. So one of the first things I think that you'd have to tell yourself is that there's no need to, unless you're like in sort of a time constraint, but there probably shouldn't be a need to rush. I think if I were to tell myself back several years ago that one piece of advice, it would be that there's no need to try to rush to get to a certain point in your building level. I think it really just takes time, practice, and patience,
Mm-hmm.
lots and lots of patience. I'm sure, Meg, like with your large builds, you definitely had to start somewhere. I mean, doing
Yeah,
a
I mean, my
carousel
builds
probably
didn't used
many
to
years
take me.
ago.
I didn't used to spend, 50 hours on a build. It used to be 5 hours and I would call it done. But
Yep.
in addition to patience, though, I think one very key thing, especially to new builders, is it can be overwhelming trying to get into such a diverse community. I mean, there's so many skill levels out there, and there's so many people who you look up to, and you think, wow, that person is so good at what they do. I don't think I'll ever get to that point. I know that some people are actually sometimes even embarrassed to share their work or to kind of get plugged into a community just because they don't feel like they're up to speed or as good as they could be. um,
Oh yeah,
but
like
I do know
intimidation,
when
yeah.
yeah, but I do know when I first started building, I was not good at all looking back on my stuff. But I still was trying to, get involved in the community and share my work. And at the time, I actually was not really embarrassed of the stuff I was making, although I probably should have been, but I wasn't. But I think that is something that people just need to, not be embarrassed to try to get yourself into community, even if you feel like you're just not good enough. Because it can be overwhelming. There's
Oh
so
yeah.
many good builders out there.
You wouldn't want to set your standard too early because I find that sometimes it's very vulnerable putting yourself out there and expecting that there'll be some kind of validation or people that'll just latch onto your content
Right.
very quickly. And it takes several iterations, kind of like tying back to what you said. When I had previous versions of my city, I used to think, okay, this is the best city I've ever built every time I started a new project because there's always something I realized that I developed in some aspect of my building that I did, whether it was kind of my sense of scale or use of building materials or tools. And every time I look back now, much like you, I'll say, did I really think this was my best work? And I can't just help but shake my head and
It
laugh
does
at
get better
myself
over
and go,
time, yes. The
yeah,
best thing to do is to
absolutely.
compare your current work with your past work instead of comparing yourself to other people, which I'm still guilty of. It's so hard not to, but it
It
gives you
is. It
something to
really is.
strive for, gives you
Mhm.
something to motivate yourself to get better.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, personal development, I think at the end of the day is probably a good mindset to have when you're a beginner builder because you don't want to be stuck with a really bad mindset early on. Otherwise, I think it negatively affects your progression as a builder. The worst part that could happen is you rage quitting and saying, "All right, I've had it," when you have so much creative potential, it's just you didn't quite explore it in the best way possible. I've seen builders that have rage quit because they
Hmm.
thought they weren't good enough. But it was only
Yeah,
because and
being
they
too
got so
confident is a
caught up.
problem too, isn't it? I guess.
They got so caught up in the results of what they wanted and kind of were looking for a specific outcome. They weren't getting it. So they didn't feel like building was worth their time. So they just rage quit and just called it a day.
Hmm.
And where they had so much potential, it's just they weren't seeing how they could
Imagine
have
if I
spun it into
rage quit
something,
years
right? Yeah.
ago when after building my ugly builds.
Well, this we wouldn't have met. This podcast wouldn't have existed,
Yeah.
and who knows what would have
There
happened
would be a
even
lot of
further.
people
Yeah.
who wouldn't know how to use World Edit.
Because there still aren't very good tutorials out there, are there now? I'm
Well,
not
there are a
entirely
lot
sure.
more now, I think, but there
Yeah,
weren't very
yeah.
many when I started making them.
That's fair, that's fair. But you have been updating your tutorials recently, haven't you, Meg?
Oh, I've been
Some of them.
making new
Or
ones that I
adding.
haven't had
Adding new ones.
before. Yes. But
Oh, right, you know what? It's
w
Loft, right? That stuff?
yes, the
And,
Archeon stuff, which
mhm.
brings another point. If you are a beginner builder and you're completely clueless about the workflow in creative mode, I mean, take the time to research different tools and things at your disposal because you don't have to build everything by hand. I know because when I first started building in creative mode, honestly, I was doing stuff by hand. And then I discovered that World Edit existed. And I was like, ooh, let me try to figure this out. So I was trying to teach it to myself. And I was building things, and pretty much the only commands I knew how to use was like, oh, I can know how to copy, flip, and paste and rotate. And just like that was it. That was like all I knew how to do. And
Yeah.
it took me forever. I didn't even know for like the first year of building that -A was a thing that you could paste without air. So I was always so annoyed that air was pasting into everything. So
Oh,
it took
man.
me a while to learn stuff. But see, once I got a grasp and learned more, that's when I wanted to help other people learn these tools. In an
Yeah,
easy
yeah.
way. But that is something that I think beginners should at least, consider. You don't have to build with commands and tools to make good builds, but it does help the building process quite a bit if you are interested in improving your workflow like that.
Oh, for sure. I mean, there are definitely people that will still stick to building by hand just because they find it better.
Right. And
And not
sometimes I
just
do that too. It is
oh, yeah.
relaxing to do that.
Same for me, and, like, I'll be streaming sometimes, and people are like, "Come on, Rainboom, why can't you just use World Edit for this?" I'm going, "Well, look, if I did that, I'd probably be spending more time flying aimlessly around my build than I would actually trying to build it and make it look like I was building something." So I
Mhm.
figure that it kinda helps pad time if I really need to add a bit of extra time to my build. But, what I was gonna get at was, something along the lines of just openness. I think kind of tying to, getting to know tools, being open to exploring because I know for me, World Edit, although it was still in its very early stages when I started doing more creative building and getting into larger builds, the larger being not so much the scale, but just the size, I was actually using vanilla Minecraft commands and trying to piece
Oh,
those out
yes.
when it came to copying and pasting and
Have you ever
stacking
tried
buildings, because I
using
usually
the,
had flap
what's it
or set
called? The
block or
structure
something like
block?
that. No, then this
Ugh.
was before the structure block, actually.
Oh,
This was
okay.
like this might have been 1.12. Yeah, I think it was 1.12 Minecraft. So World Edit would have been probably one of its earliest versions or something. There was no loft as far as I know.
Oh, no. No, no.
Other things like that. Archon wasn't there. The structure block wasn't even there yet. What I remember was using a vanilla command to do all my copy pasting or something along those lines. I can't remember what it was,
I
but
didn't even
that
know there was a
already,
vanilla command to
yeah,
do that.
which is crazy.
I
But it's
remember
funny
trying to
because it
learn
was
structure block, and that was hard enough. That was very confusing.
the thing with this though, I'll have to look this command up, but it's so funny. It was so cumbersome, and I didn't realize. I thought I was doing great because I'm like, hey, look, a fancy command, and I can actually do this much faster than building all these floors by hand. But little did I realize just how inefficient that also was when World Edit was simply could just be like stack or copy paste. But this
Mhm.
one was like a really, really cumbersome command with all sorts of details and parameters. It was crazy. But because I was limited to that vision, I actually feared mods because I didn't know how to set up my client. I was not exactly the most well versed in modifying my vanilla
Mm, that's
client. That's
true.
one thing I think one of the biggest first steps for me was actually overcoming vanilla. Once you start in vanilla, it's great so you can familiarize yourself with all the blocks, how things go. But if you really want to start to enhance your game, and not that you're cheating or anything, but I think it's just there to help you and to push you along a little bit.
Once you get into the
That's kind of
modded
where
realm
mods
of
come in.
Minecraft, yeah.
Yes, exactly. So the modded realm, and that was my big step. Once I learned World Edit, somebody actually taught me how to do it and convinced me. And when they saw me struggling with building by hand, I was like, why did I never do this earlier when I was struggling with my commands and stuff and all that kind of stuff before? It just all it took was just that step of confidence to say, all right, let's give this a shot. Even if something messes up, it's just try and try again
Yeah,
and
and
stuff.
don't
Like
be
I
afraid
was,
of considering it as cheating, because in the creative
mhm,
world, it is not cheating. It is just
yeah.
time saving.
Yes. And as far as I know, I don't think there are, now I could be mistaken in this, but I don't think there's any way that just by installing mods, or at least by putting them into setting your client up to do to accept Fabric or whatever, that it can actually mess up your game. As far as I know, there could be some people that may have done it, whether
It's never
deliberately or
messed
not.
up for me.
But as far as I know, it's pretty simple in terms of there's you'd actually have to try hard if you were worried about breaking your game with mods, as far as I know.
Now we're talking
So
specifically about Java Edition, right? Because
yes,
I don't really know much about how Bedrock Edition works because I don't really play
yeah,
on it.
I don't know if
But
there are
well,
many mods in that environment
I
though,
have
right?
heard
Are
of
there?
like building tools being created for Bedrock, but I honestly don't know much about them, if anything. So if you
That's
are
fair.
on Bedrock and you're trying to want to have some tools that will help you, I wish I could give you resources right now, but honestly, I can't think of any off the top of my head. But I do know there are developers working on tools for Bedrock as well. You just have to do
Yes.
some research on that.
It's an emerging field, I would probably
Right.
imagine, if anything. Honestly, we could probably invite somebody on this podcast in the future that might
Oh,
be a
quite
bedrock
possibly.
person and give some
Maybe they
ideas,
can
you
give
know?
us some insight about that.
Ah. Uh-huh. Yeah, very possible. Very
Add
possible.
that
Or
to the
if
list
you
of
listening happen,
ideas.
if you wanna, yeah, tell us something about that. But no, I guess we kind of are implying Java for the most part when we're talking about building and we
Hmm.
when we refer to these mods, just because that's kind of the, I guess, the de facto mode that a lot of people that I know have started with. Now, they might have also been starting on Bedrock and then switching to Java, but
I
a
have
lot of
seen many
people that really
builders who
started.
started on Bedrock and they would build amazing things just purely
Mhm.
by
Oh
hand.
yeah.
But
Absolutely. That blows my mind. So, but I mean, if it applies to you and you have the option to explore mods, I would definitely say don't be afraid to do so because I think several people can attest to the fact that they actually are lifesavers and also mental sanity savers. Because if you're going to get tired building blocks, block per block, then, it's not going to really help you very much and you might just burn yourself out. Whereas if you did it with tools and needed the quick way out, then you have that option available to you. So tools is definitely a big one. So far, what have we gone through? We've sort of talked about patience and making sure that you're not trying to accelerate. Now, if you want to do that, I mean, I couldn't tell you myself because I've sort of accepted patience from the moment I started, knowing myself because I am a very slow builder. And also, if you've never seen any of my content before and just how I release on, say, like Instagram, it's a very slow process. Whereas some people may be able to post daily and share things daily, even if it's rejigging a build that they've done in several
Some
different
people do
ways.
genuinely have more time to dedicate to it
They
too.
do.
So
Exactly. Yeah.
don't feel
Yeah.
like you know, you have to compete with everyone else. It's very hard. Even I struggle with this, but not everyone is going to have the same amount of time to dedicate to something. So you just make the most of the time you do have, and yeah, you'll see what you
Yeah.
can do.
You don't have to go full time full time in content creation to be a good content creator. There are people
Exactly.
that do it and they do fantastically at it. But like Meg and myself, we have very limited time on our hands. I mean, on behalf of Meg, I'm sure you can probably agree to this because you've got, your full-time job is there. You've got other endeavors and things you're doing with your life that
Hmm.
building only takes up a certain percentage of your week.
Building takes up
So,
all of
yeah.
my free time, any free time I have, and it still like takes me months and months to finish things.
Mhm. Oh, same. Yeah. Like, for instance, relative to the timing of this podcast, I just finished an office tower back in December, which was something I started back in June of last year. And then recently said, I want to make a quick video, but quick, quote unquote, became a couple months of working on trying to get this video together. So, timing is very slow, but I kind of find that it helps me so I don't burn myself out by just looking at the same thing over and over again. Although I have distracted myself with multiple projects, but I think that's a different story for another podcast
Oh
topic
yeah,
because
probably. And
you can
honestly,
probably talk
did we
about
talk about
distractions
that in the
all the time.
past? Getting
We
distracted?
did. I somewhat. I
I
think we kind of
I
did as a
honestly,
diversion. Yeah.
if you're binge listening to our episodes, I don't remember anything I've said in the past. So I apologize in advance if I happen to repeat myself too much.
Just call this a full circle moment where we're taking a call back from a previous episode,
Yes.
right? We're saying, hey, yeah, look, they actually know what they're talking about. They're connecting the dots. It all makes perfect sense, or something like that. So, I mean, don't worry, Meg. Even for me, like I know we did 10 episodes prior to this iteration,
Yeah, but I
but
don't remember what we talked about. Outside of reading the titles, I don't remember the
yep.
content of those at all.
The only thing I remember was how to start a podcast, number one, and define quality, which was I think was number two or three or something like that. And then,
Yeah.
yeah, something like that. But it's still, there are so many things to delve into. But I think a lot of those topics might tie into starting as a beginner builder because you could get overwhelmed. You might try to find diversions for yourself just to feel like you're being productive in Minecraft, like doing multiple projects. If you're getting tired of one, then trying your hand on another thing while that one still remains
Mhm.
unfinished. Things like that. Just I find it's interesting. People have different ways of reacting to their frustrations with Minecraft or with their creative process in general. Yeah, like with distractions or just sitting down and disciplining themselves to say, all right, I'm going to churn this out in X amount of time and see if I can do it. So definitely, there is no one size fits all solution as a beginner builder to how you will cope with things or how you will manage with things. And this is kind of why patience and time is important, I would say, when you're starting out, because you're still determining. I would think you're determining where your building style is going to go, where your, I guess, your actual workflow, what your workflow is going to start to look like. So I think you want to give yourself that time to explore what you think you like, what works best for you, what doesn't work very well for you, and kind of take it in small bits at a time. You don't have to throw everything all at once, everywhere all at once
Right, start
at
slow
the
and
very
gradually
beginning,
work
right?
on it. And
Yeah.
and if you really don't know where to start, maybe you want to start but honestly just don't know how, you can maybe just start by copying what others do. Like even if you're
Mhm.
taking a build that somebody else did and just trying to recreate it yourself versus trying to come up with your ideas because I know a lot of people do struggle with that, coming up with ideas to build. I
Oh yeah.
have the opposite problem where I have too many ideas, but I do know some beginners, they want to build, but they just don't know what to build. And maybe a good way to at least get started practicing is just copying and seeing what other people do and observing it. Now, obviously, don't go around copying builds and then claiming it as your own. Give credit where
Uh,
credit
we
is due. But,
We did have an episode on that, didn't
I
we?
think we did. I think we did have some kind of topic
Another
about
great
that.
callback. Another great callback. Yeah, yeah.
But definitely take the time to, observe how other people do things and just glean that kind of useful knowledge from other builders who have been in the building community for longer than you have been.
Oh yeah, absolutely. They have there are several sources of inspiration out there. I was going to ask you, Meg, actually, where do you turn to, or what are some
Where do I
places you would
turn to?
recommend? Or yeah, like if
Oh,
you're looking for
definitely
inspiration.
Instagram. Instagram is
Yeah.
full of amazing Minecraft builders of now most of the Instagram builders I've seen tend to build around the same scale or the same, types of builds, but I mean, if you're looking for something more specific, you might have to do more specific search in Instagram or even YouTube. If you're not looking for a Minecraft build for inspiration, maybe you're just looking for any like a lot of people look to Pinterest as well for
Yes,
inspiration
I
if
was
it
going to
isn't
mention that.
directly related to Minecraft.
Hmm, hmm. But what's interesting is actually on the topic of builders that have put stuff Minecraft related on Instagram or TikTok or places like that. I know some content creators that specifically are there to give you ideas. Sometimes will give you floor designs or wall designs or
Oh yeah.
trees or
Oh yeah.
things like that. Those are
There's
great
so
building blocks that
much.
you could totally use. And then kind of piecing together what you like and getting into whatever you're feeling inspired
Maybe
by
or
and
yeah, get
incorporating.
inspired and then add your own touch to it as well. So
Yeah,
not
there you
just
go.
straight up stealing something, although you can. Copying is okay. Just
Yeah,
just try to
at
add your
least
own
for
flair
starting
to it
point.
too.
Mhm, mhm. I think it's also start of because I find that for me, when I started, I actually had to go block for block on several things, just so that I could get a feel for how it was, how things would look like, and then see if I liked it. But then once I had those down, then I started saying, okay, I kind of like this about this design, but I kind of want to change this and explore. But that was kind of once I started getting a bit of a better idea of how to get something built in Minecraft. So then once all the beginning stuff was out of the way, then I could start putting my own flair into it and then kind of internalizing that concept of how that person built whatever it is. Like for me, for instance, skyscrapers were the biggest thing that I was into. So my search, and this was before I was on Instagram frequently, and actually before this Rainboom account existed, I would look through Google Images and try to look up Minecraft cities. And there were always the same few cities that showed up
Mhm.
that I would say, okay, these are great sources of inspiration, and I use them a lot to be able to try to get buildings for myself. Eventually, though, I got to the point where I'm going, well, okay, I kind of want to see how other people might actually do this. So, I mean, I've heard that there are a lot of different assets on planet Minecraft. I have not been there very frequently to really see what people have done. I did download once a power station from there, but I think that's the most I've done. Or maybe even the Greenfield map. I'll shout them out because they have an insane city project going on right now. If you haven't seen that, I think they're still working on it and they're actually improving it as we speak. So it's crazy. But I would turn to things like that. Eventually download them, look at them. I wouldn't actually take them. I'd say, oh, this is how they did this material. Like if I wanted to say, oh,
Mhm.
they used
Making
this
all
for
the
power lines.
observations is such a
Yes,
big
just kind of
help.
taking notes. And that's kind of that's how I would grab my inspiration as well, on top of pictures. And but then again, that's kind of piece by piece. You're gonna see it kind of fall into play as you start building as well. I think once you actually get started, then stuff will come to you,
Mhm.
and it's kind of
And
your
you're
own
not gonna know
personal
it all right
journey.
away either. It
Mhm.
takes time because
Yes.
every build I've done, I try to introduce myself to something new or, try to improve upon my last build, and it just over time, you naturally get better even without realizing it. But you won't get better though unless you're intentionally trying to get better, looking for ways to
Hmm.
improve. Because I think there are some people who get stuck thinking, "Oh, I'm not improving at all," but are you looking for any way to improve? Are you really observing and seeing how other people do things and trying to apply that to your own builds? So that's just something to
Hmm.
think about if you feel kind of stuck.
Yeah, and because the ways you improve are not just going to come to you. You kind of have to search for them.
Yeah,
in
it
this
does take
sort of
effort.
setting, right? And
It does take
yeah,
effort to
it,
improve.
it isn't it isn't simply where a matter of just sitting at your chair at your desk and then just sitting and hoping, I'm sure the answer will come to me as I sit here and ponder,
Yeah.
stare at my screen,
No.
fly around, or something like that. No, unfortunately, I mean, I wish it could be otherwise I would just have to sit here and let ideas come through and just kind of
I
I'd be
mean,
the
and
the inspo
if you
magnet
really
or
can't think
something.
of or find ways to improve your builds, don't be afraid to ask for feedback. Don't be afraid.
Yes.
This kind of goes back to not being embarrassed by your work. Like, don't be afraid to show something that might not be the best build and asking for feedback, but also make sure you're not asking for feedback too early. Make sure you've got enough of it built because I do see that as a common problem sometimes where people will be sharing their work asking for feedback, but honestly there's not much there to give feedback on. So just make sure your
Yeah.
build has you have actually put a lot of work into it already and there that way that people are more likely to be able to find ways for you to improve it.
Oh, for sure. Here's something that kind of ties into that also, and I think this would help if as to not just for you building yourself up as a builder, but also I think one of the things is building a community and getting to know other builders and people that can
Yeah.
support you. You can support them, but the thing is, you cannot get that community if you're going to be hostile to these people, or if you're going to be a little selfish, because there's a big difference, I would say, between asking for feedback on something and asking for help on something. Because I wouldn't be surprised if maybe you might be on either end of this, but you would come and see people that would say, like asking for feedback. Let's say I've built this up, and how by however percent complete it is. What do you think? Other people will say, hey, I need help building this tower. But they don't have anything to show you. They just want people to see if they can come up with tower designs for them to just build and do sort of that kind of thing. You can definitely see which of the two types of people are likely going to answer more readily. Surely feedback is easier to give. A full build is not as easy to give, for example. So
Yeah.
you definitely want to pay attention to your intentions with when it comes to asking for feedback, because people will be more than happy to provide their opinions. Like, the opinions are everywhere, I'm sure, and they're gonna love to give input. You're gonna get a lot of it if you ask for it. But if you're gonna try to be asking for just free work, then that's a different story, and you're probably not gonna get very far in that sort of
You have to
sense,
show
right?
that you're going to take initiative in your own work for people to want to
Mhm.
help you too. They don't
Yeah,
want to do the
that's
work for you. They want to see what you are capable of and then assist you and help you get better.
exactly, because that's where the effort comes in. Again, it's not
Right.
like you can just sit there and let a build come to you. That's kind of where that bit comes. So a little bit of work, but that being said, a little bit of work does go a long way. So you never know what happens when you do put it in, because again, that might lead to people noticing what your capabilities are, what your potential is. And it actually might lead to another thing I thought of that would come to mind is, if you're afraid to start by yourself, go and try to see if you can do something with other people. Maybe work on a build together or something if they need help just starting with something. Give you some opportunity to not have to carry the burden of coming up with a whole build by yourself. There are communities, for instance, I'm going to plug the bakery because it's just been growing so large, and there are a lot of people out there that definitely are very supportive in that regard. So definitely, if you're afraid to try to take it on by yourself, you don't have to take it on by yourself. There are definitely people that would like to get some insights or to be able to build with you, or allow you to join them on something so you can get a feel for what you like and how the building process might go, especially if they're more seasoned.
Yes. Very good
Yeah.
points.
Yeah, I don't know, Meg, if you've had people that have you done any collaborative
I mean,
efforts
I've done a
before?
few collabs, but usually it was for things like a contest. If it was, that's pretty much
Okay.
the only things I've really collabed with. I did do that one
Uh-huh.
community collab, years ago, but haven't done one since then because it was it was quite the thing to manage. Let me tell you.
Mhm.
I just tend
Oh, yeah.
we did have an episode about this too, another callback about solo versus group projects, and
Yes, we did.
I tend to do better as a solo builder, but that's not to say I'm opposed to doing a group project. I'm
Uh-huh.
just very picky about how I things are done.
That's fair. That's fair. However, I guess I've got an update to that because that was before I joined the bakery and the bakery was even a thing. Now,
It
if you
does
may
depend
know,
on
if
it
you've
does depend
seen,
for me the
yes.
skill level of the builders I'm building with.
That's another thing, that's for sure. I'll tell you though, for me, like from when I started with a lot of these people on the bakery that are my friends now, when they invited me for, I mean, first I was deathly afraid to join them because I'm like, hey, your building skill and my building skill are completely different floors of the building or different levels of the sky, because I surely could not get on these people's levels. At least I thought. But eventually they started inviting me to join in and say, hey, you know what, Raymond, just build whatever you want. Here's the reference. Don't, there's no specific structure. Just go and build what you feel like doing. And it kind of helped me feel confident in uh, being a little more explorative and kind of getting out of my comfort zone just a little bit. And these people, of course, were very supportive, and they weren't going to say, "Okay, Rainboom, that's a terrible design. Get rid of it. Start over again." So I guess I was kind of lucky that it's a very supportive group of people that I was
Right.
with when I was
Yeah.
doing these collaborative efforts. Because there are some cases where I've heard of horror stories about collaborative builds. Now, I don't want to scare you as a beginner builder and
I
overwhelm you
mean,
off the
for some
bat
people
thinking about that, right?
do
So,
prefer doing solo projects, and that's fine, and then
yes.
there's others who
Uh-huh.
thrive on collaborating, and that's fine too.
Yeah,
So, just kind of
that's
figure
fair.
out which area you think you'll fit best in, I guess.
Yeah, but yeah, I guess if you're there but you don't quite know what you are leaning towards, then don't hesitate to try to see what it'll be like doing things as a group if you've never tried
Yeah,
it
at least
before.
try it and see
Um,
what you think of it.
yeah, yeah, or if you don't wanna actually actively participate in one and you're just looking for inspiration, contests are for sure a great source of inspo, or just kinda getting a feel for what people build and how they
Mm,
build.
yes.
Especially, I don't know, Meg, if they give you the opportunity, like with Kibo for us, for instance, to actually look at other people's plots and
Oh
fly
yeah,
around and see
you
what's
can go
going on
to
and stuff?
any of the old contests actually. Um, well, at least on Builder's Refuge, there are the two different servers though. There's the 1.20 server currently, which is the latest one where the latest Kibo contest was, but then
Mhm.
all of the past contests are on the 1.12 server, but they're still up there for people to go explore if you wanted to. Oh, there actually was another
Ah, okay.
contest on 1.20, the grayscale one, but
Right.
yes, there's lots of content. I'm not sure how it works in the bakery because I've only logged on there once, but
That's
at
fair.
least on Builder's Refuge, you can go back and explore all the old contests and even in public plot worlds, but you're probably gonna find better builds in the contest worlds.
Oh,
So
yeah.
yeah, if you wanted to, that would be a good source of inspiration as well.
Mhm, yeah, for kind of your gold standards for people that have really, come together, or yeah,
And
like,
you know,
as
that does bring up a
collectively,
good
right?
point.
To
If you're a beginner builder, and let's say you're not very good, but you do want to get involved in some of these building contests that happen, don't be afraid of doing that. Don't be afraid
Mhm.
of not being good enough and not winning. I'm actually super proud of anyone that enters and finishes a build, regardless of their skill level. I've seen so many builds and contests where you can see all skill levels displayed, and it's just really encouraging to see that there are some people still joining the building community, and they're still pretty new to building, but they're still making the effort to see these contests through to the end, and that's just
Oh, yeah.
something to not be afraid of.
And again, you may not, I'm sure if you're there and you're sort of going, "Okay, someone surely is gonna win, but you know what? I'll join because I wanna get better." You may not think your build might be the best in the entire, span of the contest, but your potential does shine through that build. So you might not
And it's also
see it off
great
the bat.
motivation to learn too, especially when you
Yeah.
have a deadline.
Mhm. Yeah, but so you may not see it off the bat, but somebody else might. And you never know, and that's kind of where your building journey might spur off from. So several places you can do it. And even as you said, just public creative plots. Builder's
Yeah.
Refuge, I'm sure, has lots of places for inspiration. The bakery, of course, several different sizes of plot worlds,
Mhm.
and lots of different things going on, all sorts of building styles, because just all sorts of people take having fun building what they like and being able to showcase different tips. So yeah, don't be afraid to join communities. I think that if you are comfortable doing so, of course, kind of tying back to solo
I
versus
mean,
putting yourself in the
it's
world.
okay to
But
just
yeah.
lurk too in the background and just
Oh
observe
sure.
because that does
Yeah.
help a lot.
Yeah.
Just even seeing what happens within a community is helpful.
As a spectator, even you don't have to
Yes.
be an active participant, but if you're there and you want to take in some information regarding a certain build or what people are thinking or doing, yeah, it's all very helpful for sure. Absolutely. So yeah, it looks like overall that may have sounded as a beginner builder overwhelming to think about, but
Yeah, we're trying
overall,
to
I think
not
we just
overwhelm you.
yes, even though there might have been several things we brought up, like do this, don't do this, do this, it all comes down to you. I think it's just where if you start somewhere and let your building journey go from there, and just
Don't
whatever
stress
and
about
I
it.
trust. Yes, whatever will come your way is going to come your way if you put a little effort to trying to find your building style, what works for yourself, and take time. It's not a race to see who's the best builder. Of course, if you're more time bound, then that's definitely something you can do. But I think in general, there's no real race to see who's the best builder in Minecraft because that, I would say, is a purely subjective question. And I'm sure that everyone will have a different answer for it. There's lots of room. And even some people that are very experienced, I'm sure, are also still learning as they go. So there's always something new to learn about. We're all in this together with learning, and so you just starting off is definitely not you're not very far behind. There's a lot of room to catch up to get to learn. So have fun with it. I think that's the most important part too as a beginner builder. Make sure you have fun with it because if you're building for the sake of it as a chore and if it becomes like something that is no longer fun, it's not going to be enjoyable anymore. So
Yeah,
you
make sure
definitely want to
you're actually
enjoy.
interested
Yeah.
in it and having fun with it.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But yeah, so that kind of pretty much is our sum up, I think, of this theme for today. And before I end the segment, I know that we have something new we're going to introduce, as we may have hinted at the beginning. Because Meg, I'm going to turn it to you since I'm afraid I'm going to end the podcast here, which
Oh
I
dear.
don't want to leave you listening on a cliffhanger. So
This is the first episode where we're going to introduce a new segment just to answer any questions you may have for us. They could be related to Minecraft building or not related to Minecraft building. And we've already asked ahead and have received quite a few questions. We're not going to be able to answer them all in this episode, but we'll definitely be saving them for future episodes. Um, but yeah, I just
do I
wanted to
cue the
get
timpani music
started.
now?
I don't know if we're doing that right now.
No, I'm just kidding. It was funny
uh,
because we were discussing this before, and we were like, wouldn't it be funny if we had quirky music or something? Well, if you have ideas for what you think might work,
how do we segue into the questions section? But anyway, I just wanted to, the first couple questions do kind of tie into this topic of being a beginner builder. So I was going to ask them both together and then we can kind of answer them together. The first one being, this question is from Nate, by the way. We'll say who asked the question. Nate says, what started you on Minecraft? What were the events that led you to pick up Minecraft? And that followed by Wordle's question, which is how did you discover and get into building? So first we'll talk about how did we get into Minecraft, and then we'll talk about how we got into building.
sounds good. I'll let you take it away then, Meg. I think
Okay.
if you were thinking about it.
Sure, I can go first. How I got into Minecraft, what started me on Minecraft, honestly, never was interested in the game at first until my brother introduced me to it. Took me a while to kind of warm up to it, but at first I was straight up just a survival player. I just lived for survival. And of course, over time, obviously being an artist as I am, I was just more interested in building houses. Like I was just always intrigued by the building aspect of it. Um, but I didn't get into the more creative side of building until I actually saw what other people were creating in creative mode. These gigantic builds that just looked like works of art to me, dragons and whatever else have you, giant human
Mhm.
sculptures in Minecraft. And I was just amazed by that because I was just building houses and like ugly castles in survival mode. And I was like, hey, that looks really cool. I really want to do that because I've always loved drawing my whole life. And that just looked like it took the best of both worlds and put them into one game that I was having a lot of fun in. So, and the rest is history.
Mm.
I've been building ever since.
Yeah, so I'd love to see those castles. Although you probably think they're terrible, but I'd be
No,
curious to
I
see
actually
what you were
do have
thinking.
a
Do you?
video where I tour one of my first Minecraft survival worlds if you want to look it up. And I also
There you
have a
go.
video where I take the first castle I ever built in like a survival world and I upgraded it. Now that video is oh wow, that video is like 3 or 4 years old now. But it was still a huge improvement from my first castle. It's really fun to go back and look at your old builds.
Oh, absolutely. Kind of the timeline progression, right? For sure. So I guess it's my turn to to answer the first one, which is what started me. I'll never forget it. It was several things, but it was just because of people talking about it. I never got the hype when it first came out.
I didn't either.
The earliest discussions I remember were people on the school bus. This was back with me in elementary school, and people were having this debate over Minecraft versus other survival games. And then some people were like, "Why are you playing Minecraft? It looks so blocky. It looks very primitive. This one has high definition, you know." And they didn't have 4K back then in 2012, 2013. It was more like actually it's just HD, I think, or something along those lines. Like it's a high definition game. The graphics are so much better. Eventually, my cousin was playing it at one point. I think it was on his console. Funny enough, though, because there was a console version of Minecraft, or was it his computer? Either way, that doesn't make much of a difference because eventually my siblings happened to get a copy of it, and I went on, and it kind of grew on me. It was a very slow aspect. We never played survival though. When we did play survival, we played the creative version of survival. We just have all the infinite tools and all that kind of stuff. But what led me to pick it up wasn't actually so much the gameplay, but it was because of the potential for, I guess it was the type of environment. So even before Minecraft, I loved city related stuff, whether it was buildings, architectural styles, general infrastructure like roads, cars, transit, very, very specific things, even building layouts and elevators and fun things like that. And I was always trying to find the perfect program to model all these things on. I had gone through several things, some of them which are actually designed for development, like architecture. So SketchUp was one of my very first programs that I did way back when it was still under Google, I think. And that was a fun program because you could draw everything perfectly because it was always snapping and all the shapes were coming out, pushing and pulling and all that. It also had, however, this walking feature where you could actually explore builds. I think I kind of wanted something where I could explore something that I had created. And so every program I turned to was always one of those things, but they always lacked one aspect or another. For instance, the walking one, you couldn't actually walk everywhere. It had limits. You'd fall out of the world if you went too far. There were other programs that you had to code things in order to be able to actually explore them. So then I tried Minecraft as my base for it. And when I moved from just a simple box house, it wasn't even a dirt hut. It was actually, I think, a white box of wool or something like that in the sky. I'll never forget that house. But ever since then, when I built some house or modern building in there, I said, you know, this is actually kind of cool. If I can just master getting to find the right scale or the right building style, I could probably build a whole city in Minecraft. And so I've been searching for that ever since, and that was 10 years ago, believe it or not. And so several iterations later, here I am now, and that's where I am today, actually, with this particular thing in building. And I guess that kind of answers how I got into building too, which just kind of naturally came with the city. So, but tools, of course, all that stuff, the mods, that came much later. That was probably only the past 5 or 6 years of me doing it in Minecraft. Do I take the next question then?
Sure.
I guess. Okay, let's take a. Do you want to take a fun one? Maybe we'll take a fun one, or do you take these in the order we have them here?
We take them
Maybe
in the
I
order
think
we
this is
have
a
them.
good.
That was
I
the
think it's a good.
intention.
That's a good shuffle. Let's do it then. So, okay, this is going to be a real fun one here. Then, what is your favorite pizza topping? This one's from Mike.
Yeah, so I was thinking about this and I was going to say, "Oh, I don't mind just standard pepperoni pizza." But then I'm like, "Wait a minute. Pizza isn't pizza without cheese." So obviously, cheese is my favorite topping because I have met people who don't
Yes.
eat their pizza with cheese.
Hmm.
So, yes, cheese is the best. Can't have
That is
pizza
true,
without it.
actually. Some people have had just tomato sauce on there, or
Yep.
even just bread. Although I don't know if you'd call that pizza anymore. That
I
might
know,
just be bread.
right? Like, what even is
Just dough.
that?
Okay, for me though, I will say, assuming there is cheese on the pizza, interestingly, it's actually mushrooms. Because for
Oh,
some interesting reason, I've found that whenever I have a veggie pizza, or even because we have here in Canada, there's something called a Canadian pizza, which has a couple different types of meat, and that it has mushrooms. But I found that I was wondering what it was between both of those flavors or those the styles of pizza that I liked, and I think the common denominator was the mushrooms. I think it just adds an extra texture, especially if you
that's
slice them
funny.
right
I actually hate
to the
mushrooms on my
pizza.
pizza.
Well, if you ever need somebody to have those mushrooms,
Oh,
you know who
yeah.
to turn to now. I think it actually helps because then, if people have not conflicting interests and that, at least you have people that'll cover you for the other stuff that you're not going to want to eat or something like
Yeah,
that. So,
true.
and hey, at least this is not a pineapple conversation either. We're not going to have an entire thing about that whole debate sort of an idea. I'm sure people are already rolling their eyes and going, "Oh dear, here we go again." But we're not going to try that.
Alright, next
Mike
question?
also asked, yes,
Yes.
Mike also asked this question, so I'll probably take it just to kind of lump it with Mike. And what is your most used emoji?
Now this could change from time to time. So let's just answer it. What is our current most used emoji? I'm just gonna
Most
go
used
into
emoji? Okay.
Discord and see what it says.
Oh, do we want to actually do this statistically? Can you do that?
Well, you can if you click on the emojis, it will tell you frequently
Oh,
used.
the frequently used.
Yes,
So the
and my
first one that
my
shows up,
first
right?
one that shows up is the megalol.
Okay, mine's the heart. I think it's because I've been liking everyone's post in the
I
bakery and
laugh at
stuff like that.
everything. I
So
laugh at
the heart.
everybody. I laugh at me myself. I laugh at the world.
Uh-huh. However, if I were to just kind of as a second, because if you know me on the bakery, I do have a couple of cameos in the emoji. There's one of me pointing up, and apparently I've used that one a lot too.
Oh, yes.
So,
And I use a
but
thumbs
for
up a
me, it's
lot
the heart.
too.
Yes, there you go, there you go. So we'll say the heart and whatever you said, the laughing one, the
Yeah.
Meg lol one specifically, the custom laughing one.
Yes, all the meg
That
emojis.
should be good. Yes, those are wonderful, by the way. Do you have plans on adding more later down the road? I know that's
Oh, I
another
mean, I
project
always
you
do,
have
but,
too, right?
I'm also building and making videos, so it's hard to prioritize.
That's true. Maybe you should
Alright.
build one of your Megmoji as an organic
Oh,
for all we know.
no. No, 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 no. Next question is from Zarani. I hope I'm saying that right. I apologize in advance if I'm not. But asking, what are some commands, tools, features you think are missing from existing building tools that you think would be most helpful in your own builds or would be the biggest help to the wider community? So, what other commands, tools, or what have you would be helpful to the building community? Any thoughts?
Mhm. / build. Just build it for me, and I'll sit back and relax and watch.
Slash
Everything again.
build everything, and then everything
Yes.
just gets built for you.
Everything just comes up. This is contradicting everything we just mentioned in the past 40 minutes, which is you don't want to sit back and just watch a build finish off. No, I would actually say this one's interesting because I'm kind of thinking now very technically because World Edit for me has been a saver with a lot of my selections and that. And then when I discovered how to use the Archeon Loft stuff, that's actually helped for me feel comfortable with things like curtains and all that. Um, while I think about this, Meg, do you have anything that
Oh,
comes to
yeah, I
mind?
actually
Because
wrote down
I
a lot
have
of
to
stuff,
ponder.
and I was
Okay.
surprised at how many things I was thinking of,
I
considering
think
I hadn't really thought about this before, but
I
then the
might
more I
echo some of
thought
your
about it, I
statements,
was
yeah.
like, "Oh, you know what? This might be useful, and so might this and this." Now, I don't know how practical most of them are for, like, most people, but I'll just
Well,
list a
let's
few
say
of
in
the
the
things.
theoretical world.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'll just
yeah,
list
yeah,
a
go
few of
on.
the things I thought of. Well, this one has actually been on my mind for quite a while, but it's also very hard to explain, but so I was thinking about some kind of array command. I don't know if you know what arraying does in like a 3D software, but it would
Mhm.
basically
I am, but in
function
case if you're listening, yeah,
it
yeah.
would it would basically function like the stack command, but along a curve. So uh, if you had something like in your clipboard or you copied something, then you could array it or copy it along a path a certain number of times. And my original thinking
Yeah,
was it would
yes.
rotate along with the path, but if that's too complicated, it would just be the same rotation all along, but would still be very useful. Something like that.
Mhm.
So that was my one
Yeah.
idea for any
Mhm.
developers who happen to be listening. There's idea number one is the array
Nudge, nudge.
command.
Wink, wink, there
Um,
you go.
Another idea I had was selection presets. I don't know what mod or plugin this would fit in best with, but if you could have set presets for different selections. So let's say you had this one selection that covered your entire build, because maybe you often need to do something where you select an entire build or an entire region. What if you set a
Mhm.
preset to that so that when you deselected it, you could instantly select it again without having to reset those points? Like with a touch of a button, just like automatically go back to that selection.
Yeah, and then just pull it up again,
Right.
right? And this so you don't have to redo the whole tedious
Yeah,
process
like
of
if you had like a
selecting.
selection that you knew or you were going to use a lot, like
Hmm.
selecting the entire build, for example.
Yeah,
That was
yeah,
one
that
idea
would
I
be
thought
interesting.
of.
But
And
yeah, I do
then
agree with you. I think that's the one that I'll say, yeah, for me with the for my part for what I'd like to see. I remember a few examples recently where I was going, gee, if only I could let this selection just follow this path and just kind of stack up in that direction that way. So I'll take that and second that as what I'd like to see. Sorry,
okay.
go ahead for the next one.
Well, I mean, I did write down a few other things, but they're not really fleshed out ideas. Um, I did think it would be cool to have a uh I don't know if you're familiar with the convex selection of world edit. I really wish there
Mhm.
were a way you could remove the last point, much like you can with the loft selection, because it's very frustrating having to re-select that every time and you can't remove
Oh
a point
yes.
without having to
Same goes with
restart it.
Wally for me.
So
Yeah,
if you
yeah.
could have a selection like the convex selection but works just like loft, that would be
Mhm.
amazing.
Oh, 100%. All right, well, I guess you can also, because I believe Zerani is actually a dev or has dev capabilities. So go ahead and just
Yeah, if you're listening to
put a few
this,
words in or something. And I'm thinking Josh from the bakery because without him, the bakery would not be able to function as well as it does today. So, we'll tip a few words in if you're listening and expect some mail to show up. We're going to have these written up and maybe a few little treats and stuff along the way too or something.
anyway, I've listed a few ideas. Did you have any others that you thought
No, I
of?
think those are the two. I think, as I figured, as you were going to list them, then my memory was going to be
I mean, I
jogged
have
because
a
that
few
was another
others,
thing
but
too.
honestly, I think I've answered enough for that question.
Let's save them for Josh and Zarani then,
Yes.
and other does. Technically, Mike too. He's done a bit of back end work, hasn't he?
Well, not for plugin development or
Not for
anything.
plugins, but
No.
well, that's fair. Oh, it's true. His server
He's just a
management.
server
That's
owner,
right.
yes.
Gotcha, gotcha. Okay, let's see. Mobius Jetski. Mobius's question is: I know you like playing RCT. I know Meg, you like playing RCT for sure.
Yes, I think this
But do
question was directed to me.
secretly, though, no, we'll say anyway, but do you also like coasters in real life? And bonus, do you have a favorite one?
Yes, I do like roller coasters in real life, and I haven't been to too many different types of parks, but a favorite roller coaster, I mean, there is this one roller coaster in Pennsylvania, a wooden roller coaster called the Phoenix, and it's actually one of the top. I don't know if it still is, but for the longest time it was like one of the top 10 wooden coasters or something in the world,
Oh
or
yeah. Huh.
the airtime on that thing is insane. You're just out of your seat the entire ride. It's so much fun.
Oh
Um,
wow.
it is so much fun. But
Yeah, that's
but then
really
there's
fun.
other
Yeah.
coasters I like. I don't know. You said you've been to Disney World, right?
Yes, but that was well over 10 years ago,
Right,
so I don't
because
know what's still there.
I've only been there a few times myself, but I was there the last time I was there. I did get a chance to ride their new Guardians of the Galaxy coaster. That was
Hmm.
such a cool ride. I wouldn't necessarily say it's like as much of a thrill factor as it was just a really neat experience.
That's fair. That's
Yeah.
fair. It probably has a lot. Did it have a lot of graphic effects and
Oh
things
yeah,
like
it
that, or
was
was
really
it more of
cool.
the
It
ride?
was so cool.
Ah, okay. Interesting to note. Interesting to note. Well, I guess it's my turn to answer this question. Do I like roller coasters in real life? I know 10 years ago, yes, I did. I'm not sure about now because I haven't been on a roller coaster since that time. So it's a little hard to say. I'd be curious to see how I would go or how I would fare on one. But in terms of a favorite one, well, let me see. I'd have to say. Something that appears in practically almost every amusement park or fairway or midway rather, the carousel. No, I'm kidding.
Oh, we're bringing that up
High
again, are we?
high speed carousel that probably revolves faster than any other revolving ride. No, I actually don't know because I haven't been on one in a while. I would say though there was this one. I don't know if it's still there. I think this is the one that they repurposed in Disney. There was this one that used to be the Hollywood Tower of Terror. It was just a up and down ride that made you rise and fall. About
Yeah, it
several
doesn't really
stories, and the
classify as a
premise was an
coaster though.
elevator, which isn't a coaster. It's just more of a ride.
Yeah.
Okay, you know what? So coaster, okay, here's one. I do have one, and this would probably be in Universal Studios, and it's the only one I can remember because you were spinning all over the place, and that would have been the Hulk in there. And so that was because even going up, I think that's where a lot of your energy was already your anticipation came from. Because you know how most roller coasters, when they go up really slowly and kind of building that
Oh
tension
yeah,
or that anticipation.
I
One
have been on coasters, or have I? But on one that launched, oh, maybe not. Maybe I'm thinking wrong.
Yeah, this was one of those that launched
That
you all the
launched
way up, and then
you.
from there, it was high energy, and you didn't even think about that point where you were about to drop over, and it was kind of an interesting sort of adrenaline for me at the time when I went there 10
Mm.
plus years ago. I don't know if it's there now, but it definitely was there at one point in history, so I will say that. It probably will change if I go again, so we'll see how that is. Do you have time for a couple more, Meg?
Oh, yeah, we do have a couple more.
Let's do it.
All right, next is from Zinc. Oh, well, Super Zinc. I'll just say Zinc for short. What's your favorite ice cream topping?
I'll go first then.
Yeah.
Hands down, it has to be cookie dough. That
That
or
wait,
Oreo
ice cream
cookies
flavor or
something.
topping?
Topping
Cookie dough for a topping. I've heard of cookie dough
as a
flavor,
topping.
but I've never heard of it as a topping.
As a topping, there are places because some I know this one, chain we have here where if you go on to get your ice cream, you get the ice cream by itself. There is nothing inside it, and then you add all of your toppings
Oh,
later.
yeah. Yeah.
So that's one of those things where I will, if I can top with cookie dough, I will absolutely top with cookie dough because there's some that come in little bits and it just adds such a wonderful texture to vanilla ice cream or something like that for me. If there's no cookie dough, it's going to be cookies like crushed up Oreos or something like that or Reese cups. Too many things now to start to
Mhm.
jog my memory, but I'm going to have to say cookie dough if it's my favorite. So does anything?
I don't eat too much ice cream, but I would have to say the one thing I've always loved as a topping is just walnuts. I love walnuts in
Those
ice
are good
cream.
too.
So
Those are
good.
very good too. Oh, absolutely. And it's interesting because they add such not just texture, but there's a bit of a
The
flavor
crunch.
feeling, a
Crunch
crunch
is
to it.
nice
Yeah.
too. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. It's a great flavor. Oh, here's a nice one to conclude the section on actually tying back to Minecraft. Although this is probably going to vary. This is a question from Turtle that says, "What is your favorite build project so far?" Now, I wonder if this includes projects in progress or completed ones. I'm going to assume this is for
It can
completed
be
ones.
anything, in progress or
All
completed.
right. All right, Meg, does something come to mind for you?
Honestly, okay, so if you asked me a few years ago, you know what my answer would have been. It would have been the famous carousel. But
Yeah.
here's the thing. Here's the thing. I think my answer changes to this over time
Yeah.
because, and it's not necessarily that the current build I'm working on is my favorite, because that's not always the case either. Like,
Mhm,
I
mhm.
just like all of my builds equally, or I like different things about them. So it's really hard for me to choose a favorite. Um, but most of the time, it is whatever I'm currently working on, like, because that's what I'm invested in at the moment. Um,
That's fair,
but I
that's
wouldn't
fair.
necessarily. Yeah, it's so hard to pick a favorite now.
I know, right? If okay, let's say if we timestamp it for the purpose of this episode, so if we look back in time to see what you were working on, what would you put? Like, let's say specifically for this time in 2024 when we're getting this out, if you
What?
could pinpoint it to one build.
Oh, if I could pinpoint Twin Bill at this time?
Yeah, just for timekeeping purposes,
I
not
don't
not
know.
that it is
I
your
don't know. I
absolute
can't
all-time
decide.
favorite. Oh, really? Okay,
I
fair.
can't. I really can't decide. Like, of all the builds I have right now in my world, I can't decide. I've been building a bunch of dragons lately, and I love them, but I also love my carousel. But I also
Yes,
look back at older builds even. I love
there are
my
several.
little, yeah, I love them all.
There are
So it's
several.
I love the Christmas build I did. I love my little fairy build I did with the giant flowers. I don't know. I just love too many of them.
That's fair, that's fair. So we'll say the carousel is your de facto answer, just to
Well, I
give
mean,
Turtle a little peace of mind.
it's well, it's not de facto, but it is a favorite for sure.
A favorite, yeah, not
Yes.
the all-encompassing favorite build, we'll say then. That's
I'm
fair.
also really
See,
loving the current build though, the Winter Dragon. I do love that a
mm,
lot.
I was gonna say, because I remember, you were showing it a couple times recently, and there were some really interesting features and
And
texturing and coloring you
hopefully
were
the
doing
video will be
for it.
out not too long after this episode is out. Hopefully.
Well, we'll be looking forward to it, and we'll be looking forward to it for sure. So for me, with the build project, I suffer the same thing, or I go through the same thing. I don't want to put a negative connotation to it, but every time I work on something, it seems to be either bigger and or better than the last thing I did. Now, I'm in an interesting position though, because with my city project, there's a mix of new buildings that I didn't do in the original scale, as well as some that I have done and rescaled, and I've actually brought them up to the new scale. So it kind of is tricky since some of them are big and by default, but some of them are small, but I like them just because of how well put together they are. But if I were to say anything right now, just as of this podcast episode, it would have to be the office building, simply because it is the biggest of the rescaled buildings that I did where I actually tried to reimagine my own build and try to rebuild it, update it a little bit, kind of pull some elements from the old scale and then incorporate them into this new one. And I'm actually kind of really surprised and glad at how it turned out. So much so that I actually have very recently, just before we recorded this, put up a video showcasing it kind of in a retro style. So if you ever want to check that out, let me know. I mean, it's out there. You'll find it for sure. But I'll say that's my favorite build for now. But I'm sure that if we recorded this episode several months from now, or when my next
The favorite
major
build is
build is
always
out,
changing.
it's always going to change. It's always going to change. So I'd say, yeah, even if you're a beginner builder, don't worry if it changes, because your views of things will change for sure as you develop as a
Yeah,
builder.
my favorite
And
build from 5 years ago is not my favorite build now.
yeah, yeah. And so the sky always keeps getting higher and higher in terms of how far you can go as a builder. So don't worry, there's a lot ahead pretty much. And I think that actually kind of tied in very nicely as a concluding question
Yes.
overall to loop
And I think this
into
was
our
a
theme for
successful
today.
re-emerging episode of our podcast. We did want to point out that if you did have questions for us, you can ask them in my Discord server. I do have a dedicated spot for that, or you can just message them to us directly, whether it be in Discord or via Instagram or even email. If however you want to send us a question, we'll get that recorded for you and take note of it. We're trying to
Yes.
answer as many questions as we can, but obviously our answers can be quite lengthy, so we can only answer so many in an episode.
Yes, the tangents can happen, and they certainly can happen, but or just the long-windedness, especially for myself. But yeah, also we're going to leave all of our socials, I'm sure, when we have this released, where you'll see it say in the description of the video version or whatever may happen, so you can reach us out through there, or even for just anything in general. Just if you want to get in touch, you're more than welcome to. So, if you aren't already listening to us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or YouTube, know that those are the ways that you can check out this podcast and the episodes that will come. And so, with that, thanks for listening. I guess we'll conclude it at that. I mean, until the next episode, we'll see you then.
Bye.